Before we dive in, I want to thank today's sponsor, Searchality, for supporting the Independent School Moonshot podcast. When I ask a school leader to name their top 3 headaches, recruitment, retention of staff inevitably comes up. Talent shortages, costs, and the need for continuous recruitment strategies are some of the current challenges you may face. Searchality is here to help schools minimize the pain and the cost of recruiting faculty and staff with a smart platform built exclusively for K-12 schools. Built and run by a team of people who understand schools and hiring, Searchality works to make it easier for the people who oversee and make the recruitment decisions. With a strong database of talented teachers both in the US and internationally, Searchality also makes the application process work for candidates, matching vacancies with candidates' qualifications, experience, and career goals. Integrating easily with school website, onboarding is a matter of hours. Searchality eases the pain of the HR teams, heads, and business managers by drastically reducing the time and cost involved in faculty recruitment, while leaving candidates with a positive application experience. To learn how Searchality can support your school, visit searchality.com. That's SearchAlity.com. And now on to the show. Hi there, my friend. I'm Peter Barron. Welcome to today's episode of the Independent School Moonshot podcast. I am thrilled to welcome Holly Couch and JP Watson. They're authors of Becoming Uncommon. You may know JP from his work with the Gowan Group. He was on the podcast, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, JP. I can't remember exactly, but somewhere around there. And they just wrote this book, as I mentioned, Becoming Uncommon, and it's about helping teens deal with all the overwhelming pressures that are surrounding them. And I know as a parent of 2, I've certainly seen that firsthand, and shoot, as an adult, feel that quite often. You know, the world there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of stimulation. How do you manage all of that? And JP and Holly wrote a book to address that. And we're going to dig into it in just a second. But before we do, Holly and JP, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
I appreciate you both. And before we get started, can you introduce yourself and Becoming Uncommon?
Absolutely. So I'm Holly, and I am in my 6th year of teaching yoga and mindfulness and emotional intelligence in an independent high school. And I have been passionate about this work for a very long time. It started out with studying mindfulness in schools and the implications of kids and teens learning mindfulness as a skill early on. And it caught my attention, and this is over 15 years ago. And I had no idea then that it was going to end up being an entire career and a highest calling for me. And this work started with my own son, who was struggling with ADHD and anxiety. And this work absolutely turned him around. And he's doing great out of college and just absolutely thriving. So yeah, this is work that we're both very, very passionate about. And we see the need for this today, I think maybe more than ever.
Yeah. And I've got a bunch of questions, but JP, if you could share a little bit of your backstory too, that'd be great.
Of course. Again, Peter, thanks for having us on. And yeah, it was a year ago this past fall that we talked about hunting and gathering rather than just gathering as an admissions tactic. So I'm in my 28th year working in and with independent schools, from teacher and coach, program leader, division head, associate head of school. And then ultimately, came to realize through illness that I needed to step away from being in schools full time. And that was in 2021. And since then have been with the Gowan Group, full time, doing school consulting across the country. And as you know, our biggest piece of business is strategic planning. And at the same time, that's when Holly and I realized that our skill set could come together to build what we call Uncommon Education Company. And through our work together, through doing workshops and doing one-on-one and small group coaching with teens, young adults, and also their parents, we then realized that in order to scale this work and to really benefit so many more people, we needed to write a book. And when we were thinking about the title, we had all sorts of names, but we came back to becoming uncommon. And there's an origin story there as well. And it's from my time at Athens Academy, when talking with middle schoolers about how to choose to do the right thing and how that's an uncommon thing to do, in society. And that was, 15, 18 years ago. Even more so now, the right thing isn't necessarily the common, it's more uncommon. And so that was the origin. We were also doing at that time. That's when, along with some peers, some of whom are still at Athens Academy, others are at Stratford Academy, and other places now. But we started a seminar series based on the 7 habits of highly effective teens. And so we began that process of how do we intentionally go about developing the skills for lifelong success. So that's the root of this. And then when we combine, my background with Holly's background and developed this approach through our coaching, and then wanted again, as I said, to really be able to scale by writing a book. And that's, I know, what we're going to touch on, throughout this podcast, the different elements of that.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to get into the skills piece of it. Before we do, I feel like we have to set a foundation. And it's not uncommon. I mean, I've certainly seen this with my kids, where they on the externally, they all things are pointing up, right? They're just projecting, a sense of success, but internally, there's a lot more going on. They're overwhelmed, they're stressed, they're anxious. Like, it could be any number of things. From an adult perspective, as you're looking at patterns to understand how can you help kids, like what are those patterns that are often overlooked?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a really great question, especially with the kids that we work with who are succeeding, on paper. We work with teens who are not succeeding in the kind of traditional sense. But we've normalized stress and chronic stress and anxiety and overwhelm and overachieving to the point where kids don't even recognize the level of anxiety and stress that they're experiencing. They just believe that that's normal. And I think our eye-opening moment with that was when we were doing a month-long workshop at a very prestigious private school in Atlanta, where all the kids, they're applying to Ivy League schools, they're star athletes, straight A students at this school. And the response that we got after this mindfulness and emotional intelligence workshop was that they said, I didn't even realize I needed this.
I don't have the time to slow down to even internalize and realize what's going on inside.
Yeah.
But even a bigger piece of that, Peter, because you asked about, are there patterns or things that we're not seeing as adults? Some of that is because we don't recognize what's going on in us. It's hard to see anxiety in somebody else when we're seeing it through the filter of our own fear and anxiety. The fears of, is my child going to measure up? Comparison pieces that are so often very present in our schools. So those are some of the challenges for sure.
There's also a lot of shame with the kids. There's shame in experiencing anxiety or depression or overwhelm because they want to be quote unquote normal. They want to be like everybody else. So we hear this a lot as well, that they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to be different. They don't want to seem vulnerable.
And it strikes me that when they are ready for help, you're kind of in that reactive state, right? Like all of a sudden things are just boiling to the top, and now you're left in a situation where you're like, okay, how do I help? How do I help mitigate this acute situation? But what you talk about in your book is that we should be preventative versus reactive, which makes a lot of sense to me. But for you, as you're working with schools, working with families, like what does preventative support look like for, everyday life?
Yeah, that's a lot of really great questions. So mindfulness is the foundation of our work, and it is mindfulness as a secular practice, as a mental skill. And it's learning to recognize the signs and symptoms and even physiological symptoms of anxiety and stress. It's catching it early through self-awareness, through and then also using the mindfulness practices, just even just as simple as it could be a 5-minute sitting meditation, focus on your breath. That is scientifically proven to make positive changes in the brain, even just 5 minutes a day. So another aspect of prevention is learning healthy coping skills, because we can see through teens, and as I mentioned before, even witnessing grown adults who never learned healthy coping skills, and it can destroy lives. So
Peter, I realized the value for me personally of mindfulness when I was an associate head and then head of school. I began my practice of mindful meditation during that time, initially as a way to cope with what I was facing, the challenges, the stress, the nonstop. But ultimately, it became my way of being. It became a way that it wasn't to cope, it was to prepare myself for every day so that I knew what was going on internally, so that I could show up and be present in each meeting, and help other people feel at ease and be present with me, which, as leads to, so much more success in terms of relationship building in schools, which is, the core of our business.
How can teens approach this? I mean, first off, they have to, there's a whole lot of new vocabulary that they have to process, right? So like emotional intelligence, mindfulness. How do you go about helping a teen understand what these things are, and then taking those first few steps towards being practicing mindfulness?
Well, and that's exactly what we do in our book, is take them step by step. The first chapter is on emotional intelligence and really helping them understand what it is, self-awareness, self-regulation or emotional regulation, empathy, and then, relationship building. Those 4 critical elements of emotional intelligence. And then each chapter builds additional skills. The next chapter, of course, is mindfulness. And so helping them realize, yes, there's formal mindfulness practice, but there's also informal mindfulness practice. There's being willing to take a breath and respond instead of immediately react. And that's where having a practice allows you to be better prepared to do that. I worked at collegiate school in Richmond, Virginia, as I think you remember. Collegiate adopted a mindfulness program through Alex Peavy, who was then, he was actually the summer camp and extended day coordinator, but he had studied under John Kabat-Zinn. And so he started in the lower school a mindfulness practice, which then ultimately grew throughout the entire school. Russell Wilson, I'm sure you remember Russell Wilson living in Seattle. Russell Wilson was one of the earliest groups who went through the full, JK through 12th grade mindfulness red thread throughout their curriculum. The impact that had on young people was remarkable. When I was there, Alex was teaching mindful leadership as a senior capstone. And that was a group who had mindful minutes, throughout their elementary experience. They'd come in from recess and it was a mindful minute, a minute of silence, of breathing, of coming back to yourself. So those skills are really critical to developing that self-regulation or emotional regulation, which probably is one of the biggest impacts that we see, is that the nervous system regulation becomes so much stronger quite quickly in teens and young adults.
This may seem like such a basic question, but I have to ask it. I mean, why do you think this is more important now than ever before?
Well, yeah. Teens are, they are in an absolute mental health crisis. And a lot of it if you or any of your listeners have read The Anxious Generation, Dr. Jonathan Haidt, it's a lot of it is because of the phone-based childhood as opposed to play-based childhood and social media and the online world. And it's not only the social aspect of social media, but being on social media literally has rewired their brain.
Mindfulness practices pick up from there directly. So if social media is rewiring your brain, you need to bring it back in another direction. And mindfulness practices allow your brain to focus on the present, focus on the positive aspects of whatever you're doing. Again, based on, it is mind training. You're training your mind to focus on the positive aspects of what's going on right now, rather than why I wasn't invited to the party that's on social media, or why I don't look like that person who's on social media. It helps to diminish the impact of the comparison issue, which is such a root of both anxiety and depression in teens and young adults.
Talk to me about your alignment code. That that's part of your book. Where does this come up? Where does that all come into play?
Mm-hmm. So this is work that I engaged in as an adult that was absolutely life-changing. And it's so simple, yet so profound. And it's something that we just wouldn't naturally think about. And that is designing your life intentionally on purpose based on how you most want to feel. So like, for instance, when we set a goal, or we're getting into the holiday season, we have a New Year's resolution. It's never about the goal. It's actually about how we want to feel once we achieve that goal. So decide how you want to feel now, and then intentionally create experiences so that you can feel that way as often as possible. It's eye-opening because you also get very clear on how you don't want to feel. You get very clear on what's not working in your life and how that's impacting you emotionally. So it's taking intentional actions to feel the way you most want to feel, so that you're not stuck in negative patterns that you would just be in, just in default mode, just on autopilot. This is the complete opposite of living in autopilot.
And we tie in values as well, your core values. We help the reader identify, what they valued as a younger child, what they value now, what they anticipate valuing in 5 years, and identifying the pieces that run through all of those, and really determining their core values. And then along with, how you most want to feel, bring all of those pieces together and making choices daily. That's what the alignment code is about. It's aligning your choices, your daily choices, your actions to your values and how you most want to feel. And that right there changes how you approach life in and of itself.
Even when we have both teens and adults that we speak with, take a step back, look at their values, and really get clear and honest with themselves on where they're living in alignment with their values and where they are not aligned with their values at all. That it can be a face full of truth, but wow, what an incredible shift in that moment.
Yeah. So this is just sparking like experiences that I've had, right? So that's probably the intent of the book, right? Is to do the self-reflection as you're going through. So we're doing that here on the pod.
Yes.
But there was this thing.
Our book is for adults as much as it is for teens, especially adults who have not yet engaged in this work. So that's a big PS at the end of the book. This is not just news.
I can imagine. And I'll just give you my example. This was maybe, I don't know, however many years ago, but a little while back, and I had to go through like a process to figure out, like, am I headed in the right direction? And what I determined was, well, maybe I need to go in a different direction. And this was more around like career, kind of that kind of stuff. And that was a really hard thing to go through because, in your mind, you have, okay, this is it. This is the thing. And then you realize, well, maybe it isn't the thing, which then requires, And then use the word rewiring in the moment, but it does kind of feel like a rewiring to me. And I don't know if I necessarily went through everything that you articulated here, but I definitely went through versions of it. And, that really did change my life on a number of levels.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, creative change, and I would hope that all change is creative if it's going to be truly effective. We talk about, especially in our adult work, which is, we don't get as granular as we do in this book, but we first want to clarify, what are our values? How do we most want to feel? Then we want to align all of our actions with those values and our desired emotions. Then we want to envision, what could we do? And that's what you were doing, thinking, what could I do? What could be next? And hopefully you're coming up with more than one possibility.
Well, when Holly talked about how do you want to feel, right? That's what really got me, because I really focused on how do I want to feel, because I know if I'm feeling a certain way that I'm going to be better in all aspects of my life.
Absolutely. So after envision, then it's create. And that means choose. That means choose and be intentional. Like each day when you wake up, you're envisioning, you're thinking about what it is you're creating, and you're identifying the actions you're going to take that day that are in alignment with those values and emotions. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, Peter, it comes down to meaning, purpose, and joy, which we define as fulfillment.
Yeah, I love that. Every morning I do a journaling exercise, and I kind of think back about yesterday, and then I think forward for today. And I love, say those three again, JP.
So meaning, purpose, and joy. That's the alignment of your values and your feelings, and then what you've envisioned and you want to create. Those three, to us, that's the definition of fulfillment. Meaning and purpose can be, but without joy, I'm not sure it's entirely fulfillment, because joy is such a part of life.
And I want to say, the teenagers that we work with, and also when I do this with my students at school, they really get it. Like they really come to an understanding of what intentional living is, as opposed to, just running through life in default mode.
On autopilot. That's what Bag likes to call it. Autopilot.
Where you're being run by those negative thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And because a big part of this is teaching them to take more control over their life instead of just reacting to everything that's happening to them in their external world. It gives them a little more control and autonomy over how they want to live, no matter what's going on around them. It's the circle of control. This brings them into more focus and clarity on what they can control in their lives, as opposed to what they don't have control over. And I was doing this exercise with my students, and as we were looking at the circle of control, I was like, everything that we're talking about here that you do have control over has everything to do with living mindfully and your mindfulness practices.
I really appreciate that concept of control, because there's this illusion of perfection for kids, right? And
which is based in comparison.
Yeah, based in comparison. I mean, I just going through the college process with my eldest. I mean, obviously my phone is listening to me, because like you open up Instagram and now I'm seeing all these college decision opening videos and things like that. And you're just like, that's a lot of pressure that you're putting on kids all the time. Yeah. And so taking control seems like such an important skill to be able to apply to kind of crack the code here, or like break the cycle is probably a better way of saying it.
Yes.
I know you also talk a lot about altruism as a catalyst for growth.
Yes.
What happens when kids understand that?
Oh, I love this concept, and I'm so glad that we put it in the book. It was actually, I don't know why it was kind of an afterthought. It was like, wait a second, we've got to have a chapter on altruism. I've seen with the students that I work with, I work at a school for neurodivergent students and students with pretty severe emotional and behavioral challenges. And what we do is we find their strengths and we build on their strengths, and we find where can they contribute. It truly is a community. And I see it all the time when the kids learn where they can contribute. They feel important. They feel significant. It builds their confidence, also gives them more of a sense of belonging. So it's more about how, I shouldn't say more about, but it definitely has an impact on how they feel about themselves. As I teach a confidence class for girls, and I tell them, you'll be so surprised at the number one way to build confidence is kindness.
Yeah.
Kindness.
So the way we approach it, Peter, in that chapter, but there are elements of it woven throughout, is to focus on what you enjoy doing, where you have skills, things that you can do that capitalize on who you are, not trying to make you somebody else. Again, this is not a comparison thing. This is a be who you are, understand who you are, and step into opportunities that will allow you to be more fully yourself. Altruism, like Holly was just saying, that can build confidence, because the more able you are to step into who you know you are, and the key is you do know who you are. And that's what mindfulness practices help you realize.
So Holly and JP, imagine there's somebody listening to this, maybe it's a head of school, maybe it's trustee, and they're thinking, I want to bring this work into my community, but I'm not even sure where to start. What would be the first thing that they should do?
Call us.
Holly, yes, reach out, because we actually, we've shared the book is with publishers now. We're at that phase. It is a completed manuscript. But we've shared rather, a summary with a handful of schools, and already, 60% of those schools have said, hey, we want you to develop a custom curriculum and fit into what we're doing. We already have, the foundation of a curriculum that's based entirely on the book. So it's, chapter by chapter, similar to what I did at Athens Academy with the seminars where, it pulled through. But we also have that capacity because of our experience in schools, knowing how to tailor make, a curriculum for a school to do that as well. So certainly, to do it in a quicker time frame, that would be the simplest thing, would be to reach out to us. And I know you'll have our contact info in the show notes, I'm sure, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Our intention,
Well, that leads me to my next question.
with bringing this into schools is we are going to make this very simple and accessible, especially for the teachers that are going to be facilitating this. We are actually going to be recording ourselves teaching the
Core lessons.
the lessons. We want to make this as accessible, simple, and affordable as possible for all of these schools, because we want this work to get to as many teens as possible, because there is such a need.
Holly Couch, JP Watson, authors of Becoming Uncommon, thank you both for coming on the show. If somebody wants to reach out, what's the best way for them to do that?
Uncommon Education Company at gmail.com is the easiest way. We're on social media at becoming _uncommon on Instagram, and then Uncommon Education Company on Facebook. And one final note, Peter, because we mentioned, the anxious generation, which certainly, we were already about halfway through our book when that came out. And, that just fueled, our desire to get this work into the hands of young people in schools, but then 10 to 25 as well. Another great piece that's just come out in the last, I think, 6 months. Those both focus on what adults can do, how adults can relate to young people, or, structures you can put in. This is a different approach. This is an approach that empowers young people, that provides them, helps them develop the skills and become really more of their fullest self. And that's why we're so excited, to be able to bring this, to the schools that we've loved, and we know it will have a huge impact.
Well, I wish you all nothing but the best. I can't wait to see it on the shelves, and thank you both. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Peter.
much.